Hi, my name's Chip and I'm a videographer from Worthing on the south coast, and today I'm really excited to have teamed up with Wex to bring you this short video on how I create a bit more of an emotive feel in my storytelling. I'm going to be heading over to a chocolate maker in Worthing called Terre de Sienne. The owner Audrey is going to take us through the entire chocolate making process, all the way from the bean to the final product. But before we get there, I'm going to run through my kit bag. So the camera I shoot on is my Canon R6. Absolutely love this camera. It's a beautiful hybrid camera. It shoots amazing stills, fantastic video, 4K, 50 frames a second, 10-bit color with barely any crop on the sensor. It's a lovely full frame sensor. I'm pairing it with my practically live-on lens, which is my Canon 24-70 2.8. I love this lens. If I'm out shooting on my own, I don't need to change it all day. It makes shooting so much easier. On the front of that, I've got my variable ND filter, and I've also got my Tiffin Black Pro Mist 1/8, which just softens the image slightly, rolls off our highlights, gives us a slightly more dreamy look, and yeah, a slightly more filmic look with the Pro Mist. So that is the camera I shoot on. Next, I have with me my Atomos Shinobi monitor, really bright monitor, great for filming outdoors in daylight and things. I also have, audio-wise, my Rode VideoMic Pro. This sits on top of my camera sometimes if I need better scratch audio, plugs straight into the camera. Shotgun mic, has a great sound to it. I have the Rode Wireless Go set. It's a fantastic little wireless set. Can plug a lav into it, and yeah, perfect for portable wireless microphone situations. And I have my little field recorder, which is a Zoom H1. Runs just on one single AA battery, really portable and great for capturing any sound effects out in the field. Always got a bunch of SD cards, blowers to keep the lenses and my sensor clean. Not that I'm going to need that today because I'm just using one lens. One of the benefits of just using one lens for the whole day. Chargers, batteries, gaffer tape, all the usual stuff. That is my main kit bag. This stuff goes with me everywhere I go, so I don't always use all of it, but it's always with me. For my tripod, I have my Manfrotto tripod. Always use Manfrotto. This is the 190 X Pro 3. For me, it's the perfect size and weight. It's small enough and compact enough that I can carry it around with me all day, but it's heavy enough that it's not going to get blown over in the wind or outdoor situations. And of course, it's got the fluid head on top of it. I go everywhere with this. So in preparation for the shoot, I actually went and visited Audrey last week to check out the shop. I think it's always good to go and view the location you're filming in before you get there, just so there's no surprises when you arrive. I've decided that I'm going to separate this shoot into 3 sections. I'm going to film an interview with Audrey, I'm going to film the chocolate making process, and I'm going to grab a load of B-roll of different elements of the shop and Audrey in the surroundings and on location. So I'm mainly going to be filming today 25 frames a second, but occasionally I'm going to shift over to 50 frames as well to get some slow motion shots. As I've said with the Canon, I can shift over almost seamlessly. I'm not going to have a big crop on that sensor when I shift over to 50 frames, and I'm still going to get that beautiful full frame look with the slow motion. 10-bit color, 4K, it just means when I take it back to edit it and start grading, I know I can really push those colors and the image is really going to hold up. I think sometimes when I watch YouTube tutorials on cinematography and lighting, it's very easy to get overwhelmed sometimes with the amount of kit going on. So today I'm shooting on my own. I'm a solo shooter for the day, so I'm going to try and keep my kit as light and as nimble as possible. That's one of the big reasons why I'm sticking with one lens. I don't have to worry about my lens choices. That's fixed, and we're just going to try and keep it as light and as compact as possible. So that is my main kit. I've got a few bits of additional lighting, but I'm going to go through all of that when I set up for the interview. So I'm setting up for our first interview with Audrey. I want to get this done first, mainly because I want to find out a bit more about Audrey, her processes, her passions, things like that. And hopefully that's going to really dictate my B-roll and how I film my B-roll. I've heard from Audrey already that it takes 2 to 3 weeks to make 1 bar of chocolate. So I don't want to be running around handheld, crash zooms, filming everything like crazy if it doesn't match the story that we're hearing. and hopefully when you see a visual that matches what you're hearing, you're going to get a more emotive response from the watchers, your viewers. So sometimes when we're in spaces where there's loads of light streaming through all the windows and we don't have a lot of lighting with us, it's actually easier to try and subtract some light. So I've placed just this. It's a really cheap kind of blackout blind thing that I've just hooked up with a T-stand, and we're just going to put it on the near side of Audrey's face just to bring a bit more shadow in and depth into our image. I'm just going to set up a hair light. I just find, especially with people with brunette, brown, dark hair and things, it's always nice to help separate them from the background with a hair light. Sometimes you don't have to do it so much if someone's blonde, but I think it helps just with a bit of separation in our interviews. So this is the Falcon Eyes. It's an LED roll panel, much lighter than a bigger softbox like this, so you can kind of get it into tight spaces. You can use it really creatively. You can stick it to the tops of car roofs if you need to light interior car scenes, things like that. Anywhere where a bigger softbox can't go, it's really, really helpful to have. My key light is the Amaran 200X. It's the bi-colour version, so I can control it all on my phone. It's really helpful for me as a solo shooter if I don't have other crew on set. So we're about to start the interview with Audrey. There's two things that I try to look for straight away when I'm filming an interview. The first one is a bit of depth. I want to try and get my subject away from a wall. So if I can get some space behind them, it's always beneficial. And the second thing I guess I'm looking for is a bit of character, or a bit of personality, I guess. So I'm filming this way because these shelves look incredible. It really kind of gives you a sense of the kind of person Audrey is. I love the displays. So we're going to have that in the background, try and get away from white walls, things like that. So I've got the honeycomb grid on at the moment because the room has got a lot of windows. We've got the windows to the north and to the south. I'm trying to just close off a bit of light and get a bit of concentrated light just on Audrey and try and get a bit more separation from the background. So I'm using the Rode Wireless Go with a lav just to get the audio for the interview. I wanted a nice close sound. I could have mic'd it overhead, and sometimes I do prefer the sound of the overhead microphone, but it would have brought a little bit more distance to it. And because I want to use this for a voiceover, I've gone with a lav so we get a nice close sound. Hopefully we can keep the levels on the camera down, get rid of any hiss that might be there. So yeah, that's why I've gone with this. What we're going to do, when you're looking, you're going to pretend, because I can't get in there, you're going to be looking this way, just off camera this way. So it might actually help you rather than looking at the lens or looking at me. Yeah. Just pick something out here, maybe one of the flowers on the wall, maybe this bird over here. Okay. And that can be your person that you're talking to, okay? And yeah, as I explained earlier, we're just going to be trying to get you talking a little bit more about your passion for chocolate. We can talk about the way you make it as well. But I'm really looking for the reasons why you're doing it ethically, why you're making sure all the ingredients are the highest quality, that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing I'm really interested in. So for this interview setup today, I've got this setup going on. So I've got obviously my Canon R6. It's a fantastic camera that 4K 10-bit colours. It's great that I can shoot slow-mo as well, 4K 10-bit, and it doesn't crop in on the sensor. Well, it does, but only a tiny, tiny bit. Which is amazing. It makes my workflow so much quicker. I've got my Canon 24-70 fixed aperture 2.8. It's a beautiful lens. And then on the front of it, I've got a Tiffin Pro Mist 1/8, and that just helps to soften my highlights a tiny bit, blooms out any harsh lighting, really just gives it a slightly softer, more filmic look to the image. And on top of that, I've got a variable ND filter, just that I can change on the fly if I need to just adjust my exposure. But obviously I don't want to change my shutter speed and I don't want to change my frame rate. So we finished up the interview with Audrey. Really interesting learning about the process, but also about the shop itself and the collaborations with local artists. So now we're going to start filming our B-roll sequences, but always in the back of our mind have what we've spoken about in the interview, and hopefully that will guide how we're going to now film our B-roll. We're going to take our time with it, as Audrey does with the chocolate making process, and really take some care over our B-roll. So we're going to start filming our B-roll sequence now of Audrey actually making the chocolate. And I wanted to utilise slightly different areas of the room. So we've had our interview set up this way, and I wanted to get a completely different aspect and film our B-roll sequence this way. It just gives us different options, gives us different looks from the same room. We've got the window in the background, which is going to be in some of the shots. So I've brought my key light over to the window is now going to motivate our key light from this side. We'll just light Audrey a bit more, bring up the level here, and hopefully it'll mean we can keep that window in the background. So we've got our light over here and we're being motivated that way. The light's just looking a little bit flat for me, and I wanted it to look slightly more cinematic, I guess, a little bit more shade on one side of the face. So I'm just going to, again, just black out this window a little bit. If there's a little bit of spill coming in, that's fine, but I'm just trying to lower the level a tiny bit on this side. So I'm using my false colours just to check exposure on Audrey's skin. With the Canons, I like to get my highlights on my skin around the red or the light grey, so I'm just kind of working my way along, trusting the false colour, not trusting my eye with this. I think the Shinobi sometimes is a little bit bright, so although that looks nice to my eyes now, when I look at it, it's actually maybe a little bit under, so I'm just going to bring it up slightly. I can always bring it back down again in post, but it just gives me a little bit more control in post. So we're about to start filming our B-roll sequence now, and I like to split my B-roll up into different actions. So we've got, for example, we've got the nibs going in, they're being blended, we've got the butter being added, and then we go through the stage of pouring and then wrapping. Each of those actions, I really want to try and capture two different angles of them. I think when you're a solo shooter, it's really nice to capture things from two different angles, two different focal lengths, and then you can put the images together. It just gives the impression maybe you've got two cameras on the go, maybe you've got a slightly bigger setup. I really like doing that. It's something which I enjoy doing. I'm going to stick with 25 frames a second for now. I may mix that up and get some slow-mos in there as well, but I want to be a little bit conscious of not immediately going for everything slow motion. I find that sometimes I definitely used to overuse it a bit. If I feel a shot is going to look really good in slow motion, I'll then switch over and use the 50 frames, but I won't just go to it and use it for every single shot for now. When I'm filming slow motion, I'll always film 50 frames a second, 1/100 shutter speed. This is where this camera really comes alive for me. You don't get any crop, only a tiny, tiny crop on the sensor, so you can just be shooting your normal 25 frames a second, switch over to slow-mo, you still have 4K, 10-bit colour, slow motion with hardly any crop. It's really fantastic. One thing to just look out for in locations like this, when you've got your key light set up, we've got all these pictures behind Audrey, and I just need to be really careful not to get my key light showing in the reflections of these, especially with the honeycomb grid on. It's an instant giveaway. So just be careful, move around when you're trying to set up your first shot. If you're trying to get an establishing wide shot, just move around and find a space where the light isn't reflecting back off those pictures. I'm just trying to get a few locked off shots. I think it's going to really help to match up with the way which Audrey actually makes the chocolate, not rushing it. I don't want it all handheld. Any handheld movements I'm using today, I'm going to be doing very slowly. There's not going to be too much pace to it. I think the art of making the chocolate is quite a patient process, so I want to try and match that with my shots. So sometimes if you're getting a bit distracted with lighting, blackout blinds, and you'll find it a little bit hard to actually get into the story, I do like, if possible, to sometimes use my viewfinder on the camera. It helps me really have a more visceral experience when I'm filming. I can actually be in the story, not with any distractions around me, they're all gone. So sometimes I like to go 50mm lens. It really looks, it's kind of very similar to how the eye sees is your 50mm. So I'll go on that, and then I'll go with the viewfinder, and it just helps me try and really dive into the story a bit more. So we finished up filming the chocolate making B-roll. Now we're just going to get some general B-roll from around the shop. Again, I'm taking my time with this. I want it to fit the mood of the piece. I'd much rather I get 10 really solid shots here rather than 20 or 30 handheld rushing around. So I'm just taking my time, walking around the shop, seeing all the items on display, and yeah, taking my time with it. So after the Canon R6 was released, Canon actually put out a new firmware which gave C-Log 3 to the camera, it gives us a bit more dynamic range, which just means that I know I'm going to have way more to play with in post. It means that grading is going to be easier. All I'm doing at the moment is I'm just trying to protect my highlights. I'm not going above 80 IRE. I know that 80 IRE is going to come out once I convert it to about 95. I really don't want to push it. So anything below that, just protecting my highlights, keeping that nice cinematic image. So we just wrapped up with Audrey at Terre de Sienne. A couple of tips from me. Tip number one is try and let your interview or your voiceover dictate how you're filming for the rest of the day with your B-roll. I think it's really important when you're trying to create something emotive that the audio and the visual really match together well. So for example, with Audrey, she was talking about how patient and how much time the chocolate takes to make. And so we didn't want to be running around handheld as quickly as possible. We wanted that visual to match what she was saying. Tip number two is when we're filming our B-roll, try and consider when you want to use your slow motion and maybe use it a little bit more sparingly. I know for a long time, all my B-roll, I was filming at 50 frames a second and it was all slow motion. But I think it's really important that we interject the slow motion stuff with our normal pace footage, because when you then see the slow-mo, it adds more weight and more gravity to it. So try and be selective when filming your slow motion shots and decide when a shot needs it. I really hope you enjoyed that video, and I'd love it if you could follow me on Instagram at Chip Creative UK. Thanks so much to Wex for having me on board. And if you found anything useful in this video that you're able to use in your future projects, make sure to tag them with the hashtag WexHowTo. Thank you very much.
Chocolate is a very expensive product to make. If you get it cheap, it just means that someone somewhere is suffering. When I started making research about how to source my ingredients, I realized that not all chocolate is ethical, and even when it's labeled ethical, it's not always the case. I'm Audrey. I created Terre de Sienne about 3 years ago now. I focus on making chocolate from bean to bar. My cocoa beans are organic and sustainably sourced. I always make sure that everyone in the process is being paid fairly. I know how everybody is treated all along the way, and that's really important. I started having collaboration with artists before opening the shop. When I opened the shop, I just thought that I should include them as well because they were part of my journey. Eventually, I had candles from local makers, jams, and other products.